Basketball, football, baseball. From Division I to Division III, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Don Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
Yo, ma. Oh, yeah. Come on.
All right, welcome in. Happy Saturday, everybody. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can join the conversation at the Nicolay Law Talk and Text line, 414-677-1250, or find us at all of our socials at Wisconsin Sports Radio. Don Macholis, along with the professor, Dan Underberg. Charlie Usen on the ones and twos, keeping us in line for the next 2 hours. A lot to get to in a few minutes. We will go to the Nicolay Law Talk and Text line and have a conversation for the first time in some time with one of our favorites, and it's head coach Bart Lundy from UWM. Panther head coach is slated to join us here in just a few minutes. We'll get into some Badger news, both on the hard court and the football field. We'll get into some D3 baseball talk, a ton of baseball and softball tournaments at the D3 level, the conference tournaments being played today as they start wrapping their way up. You'll get some champions today, Dan. Some, depending on how this win-loss thing works out in the double elimination, will move it into Sunday.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, before we get too knee deep into it, because again, we'll talk about it in hour two, but a team like Whitewater, number 3 in the country, just been dominating in the WIAC, starts the WIAC tournament and loses to River Falls.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the crazy part about baseball and women's softball, that you can have a little bit of a miscue, a misgiving, a mess up, whatever I want to call it. But you get an opportunity to survive and advance a little bit, even with a loss.
A little closer to what you're used to seeing professionally. You're obviously trying to win a series, whereas, in professional basketball, you have series. In college basketball, you're one and done. So yeah, this is it's a little more fair maybe, but at the same time, it's a little harder to follow.
It is. It's incredibly challenging for someone of my intellectual level, which can be minimal at times, to figure out where these teams are. But again, it does, as you said, make things a little bit more equitable so that you don't get an opportunity to lose out, especially, again, I go back to Whitewater, who's had an incredible season to this point, but then just had that hiccup against River Falls. And now we'll wait. Again, I so badly want to start talking to some of these baseball coaches, but where our time slot is and the way tournaments and rainouts and everything that we've talked about all season long with college baseball and college women's softball, the planets just haven't lined up. So hopefully, as things start to settle in and we get to the national tournament, because you got to figure a team like Whitewater is in. They'll be in the national tournament. Now, should Whitewater lose the WIAC tournament, they're still headed to the national tournament, but now you might find another WIAC team that gets to slide in addition to those that you have a pretty good inclination are going to be invited.
Yeah, you look at what Whitewater has done consistently all season. There's no reasonable excuse why they would not make the tournament should they not win the WIAC tournament. But that's, again, we have lauded the WIAC year after year after year for their equity, right, in terms of their competitiveness. Baseball is no different, and so I am not going to turn down the opportunity to have another team from Wisconsin go into the national tournament.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the more the merrier, right? We saw that in basketball, where between the men's and women's, we had 13 teams make the national tournament. And, it's a tournament. Baseball, again, women's softball, a little bit different, that you get an opportunity to lose one and still be able to survive. But in basketball, a much different scenario where you're in that one and done type situation. And the more teams you can get in, the more chances you give the state, the better off we are. We are now going to go to the Nicolay Law talk and text line and bring in, as I said in the intro, for the first time in quite some time. He's the head coach at UWM. It's Panther head coach Bart Lundy. Coach, good morning. How are you?
Morning. Doing fantastic. How are you guys?
We are doing great. We appreciate the time on a Saturday. I know this time of the year, I'm sure you've got a lot of things going on, not only on the professional side, but the family side as well. So we appreciate a couple of minutes here this morning. Coach, as you've had to retool, like every team now has to do in the current state of basketball, one of the guys that signed and is raring to go for another season at UWM is Danilo Jovanovic. And having D'Lo back, what does that mean for you as a coach? We were talking a couple of weeks ago with Greg Garden about having Nolan Winter and Rapp coming back in because you've got that culture holder, so to speak, that can now pass it on to the new guys coming in. How important is it to have D'Lo back in the mix?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, I think Coach Gard said it right. You know, you can't put more emphasis than you guys just did on having the culture piece and, you know, the familiarity with him, with the program, with, you know, me with him. And for us in D'Lo, it goes even a little further. He before he got injured last year, he had really become kind of the focal point of our offense. You know, it wasn't always scoring, but you know, we were able to get him the ball in different positions, and he's a terrific playmaker as well as a scorer. So when he got injured and got derailed last year, it was pretty sad, not only for our team, but for him, because he was kind of coming into his own as who he could be as a player.
How, as you mentioned about, you know, D'Lo getting derailed, but unfortunately for the Panthers last season, there was a lot of derailment. There were a lot of injuries that you had to deal with. Explain how, as negative as that is, how this may have benefited some of the younger guys that are coming in. And do you think your team now is going to be a little bit stronger as a result of the crucible from last year?
Well, you want me to give you the coach answer? Or you want me to tell you the truth?
I want you to tell me the
truth, man. Two things happened. We did have some guys emerge that.
Did we lose Coach?
I think we did.
We did lose Coach.
You know what happened? He was about to give us the truth.
Truth bomb.
He wanted the truth, Dan.
Yeah, I asked for
and
the
then
truth.
Suddenly,
I can handle the truth. Let's get the truth.
That's where we need the Tom Cruise soundbite right there. So Charlie's going to work at getting Coach back on. But I think your question is very poignant in the fact that, you know, they were dealing with a number of injuries. I think we got Coach. Coach just hung up. He was in the middle of giving us the truth, and then suddenly the phone went dead. So, Coach, pick it up after what Dan was talking about.
No, I just decided you guys can't handle the truth.
There we go. Thanks, Coach.
Unfair.
There you go.
No, you know, two things did happen. We did have some guys emerge that, you know, Chandler Jackson comes to mind, that he went from being a guy that was going to redshirt to, you know, now a guy we look at that could be an all-league player for us, and was arguably our best player by the end of the season. Some of that's by default with the number of injuries we had, but Chandler really came into his own. And then it caused me to really evaluate everything that we were doing, everything in the program. And I think this off season, you know, kind of blowing things up is maybe a bad term, but you know, we made some tough decisions, and I think it prepared us for this off season, and was good for me. I mean, it was good. It was a good exercise. It was a challenging year. I had to go from, you know, having a team that I thought could play super fast to really having to pump the brakes and play half court and slow it down to give us a chance to compete. So, you know, in all my years, maybe the most challenging, but it was kind of fun. You know, it's kind of fun to have those challenges.
Well, I would say there were definitely some rewards in some of the adversity that you had to work through. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of the younger guys and those that are coming back, I remember a game, it was the UW Green Bay game, and we talked for a minute about the communication part of it, that it just seemed it took a minute, but the guys were able to come together, and that has to be a huge stepping stone as you head in now to the offseason and get ready for next year.
It is, and you know, it felt like we coached about 6 different teams. But yeah, and that last group really started to gel and to come together and to learn each other. You know, the hard thing about this era of college sports, you know, the guys that we lost, not only were they really good players, but they were the only ones we had on the roster with true Division I experience. And so you ended up with a bunch of players, not that they weren't good enough or talented enough. They just had never been through it, and they got thrown into the fire, and they did an excellent job. And you know, we went from being, you know, almost a unanimous pick to win the league to really scrapping and trying to just compete in every game. So really a roller coaster of a year.
Art, when we have talked to you in the past, it's usually been in season. So talking to you as we approach the summer is a little bit different. What do you do for your program over the summer? What do you want the guys to do? How are they conditioning? What are kind of the expectations for the team?
Yeah, we'll you know, with the portal, right now we're finishing up the recruiting. We're starting on next year's recruiting. We're trying to onboard all these new guys, which is really, really kind of tough. And then, you know, we'll have them for 8 weeks in the summer to work out. And I told our staff, we just met about this week, and I told our staff, number 1, 2, and 3 is make sure nobody gets hurt. So, you know, having a healthy team. I told them if we keep everybody healthy and we're able to get the bus there on time, we win way more than 12 games last year. So, you know, we've got to make sure they're healthy. And I do want to approach the summer, you know, with a lot of skill work and individual development, as well as, you know, trying to keep them in the weight room and get them strong, get them healthy, but not a lot of bone on bone. You know, some team concepts, but not a lot of contact. They'll play enough pickup and things like that. But I do want to come out of the summer with a healthy team.
Could you just see the visa bill and Bart's wife coming down going, what's with all the bubble wrap? Why are we buying all this bubble wrap as we wrap everybody up into it?
That's right.
So Coach, let's talk about some of the guys that you've signed moving into next season. I want to start with Trey Norman. You get the junior guard who was last with Marquette. And so someone who's been developed by Shaka Smart, you know, has been coached up very well, looking to have an opportunity to get some time, I would imagine, on the floor. Maybe the reasoning behind the transfer, but a really great pickup, in my opinion, for what it's worth, in grabbing Trey Norman from Marquette.
No, I feel the same way. When you get a guy who has been in the culture that Shaka has established, you know, you're getting, first of all, first-rate, first-class individual. And then with Trey, he's just a tremendous leader, which, you know, we need an older guy and somebody, especially on the perimeter, that he's played in 98 games in the Big East. So, you know, and he's got such good leadership skills. He just wanted an opportunity to, you know, just to be on the floor more. And, you know, we were fortunate. There were a lot of people that wanted Trey, and we were fortunate to have, you know, the opportunity to get him here. And we expect big things from him.
How about Aaron Womack? He's a nice addition too. Young guy, 6'5". What about him?
Well, Aaron, you know, everybody calls him Boss, so I always call him Boss. He when he was a 9th grader, and I was just getting here into into the Wisconsin recruiting scene or back into it. And I watched him as a ninth grader, and I said, that one could be a pro. And we were his very first offer way back then. So, you know, obviously he got the opportunity to go to Syracuse and redshirted this year. And then, you know, when he decided that he was going to go in the portal and look for a new opportunity with the coaching change there, you know, we were, I think, his first phone call back. So I think the world of him and his family. Again, another high character kid. And, you know, we've got a challenge to him. Can he come in and he's a 6'7", maybe 6'8", shooter, can do a lot more. We have big expectations. You know, I think he's a guy that in his career, he can make 100 threes in a season.
Coach, before we talk about a couple of the other guys that have signed up to be a part of this UWM Panther team coming into next year, you have a tendency to go ahead and find guys who were from the area, who've gone elsewhere, things don't work out, they're looking for a new opportunity like you were just describing. And then I think about, let's say, the Jose Winstons of the world who are from the area, who have these great connections. How important is it, even when somebody won't initially necessarily sign with UWM out of high school, that you keep those connections open so that there's these avenues for these players to, in essence, come back home?
Well, I think you've hit on the on our entire our entire motivation and theme of how we're going about our recruiting. If you look at, we do have Jose Winston on our staff, also Ben Walker and Julian Schwartz, who are three just you know, kind of iconic players and coaches here in the state. And we really want to be that destination for guys who want to wear Milwaukee across their chest and represent the city and represent the state. And a lot of times these kids will go away and they start to realize, you know, Milwaukee's really a great place, not only our university, but the city itself. And so we do stay in touch. You know, there's going to be guys that we can get straight out of high school. We just got Amari Herford from Beloit, who I think is, you know, a really special player, #1 ranked point guard in the state. And but then you know, there's going to be the Aaron Womacs of the world who go off, and then we're able to attract them back. And you know, I think the more that we do well with local guys and their families and their coaches see that we develop them and we take care of them, and they have success here, then, you know, we're going to continue to get better and better in that area.
What do you do? And again, getting back to the players a little bit, but what do you do to kind of, as you mentioned earlier, onboard new guys as quickly as you can? Don and I have talked about in college basketball, especially in this new era that we're in, about how difficult it is to get that cohesiveness, that chemistry is right off the bat. And a lot of times you have to wait, you know, it gets some deeply into the season before it really feels like it's really happening. But what do you do when they walk in as your players? They're signed, they're ready to go, to just kind of get them to feel like this is home?
Yeah, it's well, when I was saying onboarding, I'm thinking paperwork.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah.
Compliance and housing, where are they going to live? You know, is their agent happy with their new contract, which is a whole other topic.
Oh my gosh.
But we do have a really, I think, a pretty good and extensive system. You know, we were fortunate last year. The San Diego Chargers have a guy that, and he's got a title that I wish I could remember the special title that he has. But they do these. They have to bring, you know, those NFL teams coming together, and they have to do this basically the same thing. It's a whole new group of guys, and they've got to mesh them together quickly. And they do these meetings that are really fast. But everybody gets they call it an at bat. So you have 5 minutes. And so we kind of introduce things, and we have one of the players run each one of the meetings. Really, we found that not only does it get them a lot of information, sometimes it's just the academic, you know, advisor, or it could be, you know, how we guard ball screens. There's 5 minutes. An at bat can be about anything, and it's really been helpful to get everybody on the same page. And then as far as making them come together, we also do a thing called opening doors, where we basically sit around in a circle, and I bring a basketball out. We call the basketball the cake, and you can only talk if you have the cake, and then they tell their stories. So, they're looking at each other going, okay, this is my competition. But by the time they hear their stories, they go, wow, they get the goods and the bads and the struggles, and they're going, okay, wow, that's not much different from my story. And I think allowing them to learn each other in that way is almost as important as basketball.
Bart, one more question, and then we'll let you go, because I know, again, you've got family obligations, and rightfully so, on a Saturday. That's what you should be doing instead of talking to us yuckleheads, but we always appreciate the time that you give us. I was doing some reading this morning, which can be scary enough as it is right there, but talking about how, with the expansion of the NCAA tournament, that it just appeared to the person writing the article, with all of the things happening in the world of college athletics, that the solution for many right now is just to generate more revenue and throw money at it, when there are a number of things that are taking place that don't necessarily require money, so to speak, in order to fix. With the expansion of the NCAA tournament, what's your thoughts? Because we had this discussion. My disappointment comes in the fact that we're allowing some mediocre Power 4 schools to get into the tournament instead of making the regular season more meaningful. And quite honestly, I'm for championing the cause that there should be some conferences that allow for regular season champions to get into the tournament. What's your thoughts now with this whole expansion thing?
Well, let me preface my answer with, Amanda Braun, our athletic director, she had the honor yesterday. She was the head of the women's selection committee this year, and they joined the men's selection committee in their meetings. And I guess the head of each, the men's and the women's, they take turns heading the meeting. And Amanda got the privilege of heading the meeting yesterday, where they made the announcement, which was a great honor for her, and something she's worked really hard on. So I'm gonna tell you that I'll support what they did. My only fear is that I grew up on the NCAA tournament just like you guys did. I think it's the best event in sports, and I hope we're not tinkering with something that that was really almost perfect to begin with. Sometimes you don't mess with happy, but there's so much attention on it, and the Power 4 conferences have such a, they have so much power with what's going to happen in college sports right now, that they wanted more teams in, and that's what happened. So, hopefully it's the same tournament, and we still have the Cinderellas, and I just hope that we don't hurt our fan base with the expansion.
Bart, can't thank you enough as always. Appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy Mother's Day to your wife. And again, once the season starts ramping up again, hope to have you on real soon.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon. Absolutely.
Bart Lundy, the head coach for UWM, joining us on the Nicolay Law Talk and Text line. It's amazing to hear all of the things, and I don't think we're privy to. I think we get the tip of the iceberg, that a Bart Lundy, a Greg Gard, a Shaka Smart, you can go right down the line of any Division I coach, what they're going through right now to onboard, right, the team, to start getting them to coalesce with one another, so that hopefully, to your point, in the midst of that question, we're not waiting till January for the team to finally come together and start playing some good cohesive basketball.
Yeah, and that's just part of the idea of building relationships with the team, so you don't have a bunch of strangers walking on the court and trying to figure out whose game fits where. Yeah, there's a lot of this kind of that cohesiveness, that onboarding, it still has to happen on the court. It still has to happen when game action happens in October and November and doing all that. But the goal is, by the time you get to December, you've figured out what your teammate is doing, what they like to do, how they feel about things, how they're going to react to things. and just knowing how to respond in kind. And that's what they're doing right now, building those relationships. So by the time you get to November, you think
Right.
you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to a break. On the other side of the break, let's talk some Badger hoops because we had one of the top prospects in state leave the state for next year. So we'll get into that discussion. Before we do so, shout out to Sean, Jeff, Dave, Paul. They're over at Evergreen Golf Course listening on the Odyssey app.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you guys taking some time. I know how they hit, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin
they tuned
Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
can help me and myself, but I gave everything. It's the thing I do for you. In return, you're the same for me.
Welcome back in. College Sports Weekly, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. We are live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. Always good to talk to Bart Lundy. I mean, one of the best, I think, in the business. I think we are blessed in the state of Wisconsin at the Division I level to have really 4 very good basketball coaches.
Yeah, we are. And, you know, we've talked about that concept in different areas. We've talked about broadcasting, what we have, and the coaches that we have. And you appreciate it while you can, because you don't know how long it's going to last.
Right.
So, yeah, just watch as much as you can, appreciate it, support any way you can, and just enjoy it.
And not everything always works out the way you hope. But
Right.
as far as like 4 solid individuals coaching our teams, I'm good with it. Hey, shout out to Ron out on the western part of the state who's checking us out on Facebook. Appreciate the time this morning, sir. Always appreciate the time when Ron Pye checks in on the Facebook page. Let's get into the hoops discussion a little bit more. Listen, before this Wisconsin thing, The Athletic had an article this week talking about expenditures, Dan, and I'm just going to throw this up, and we hadn't really talked about this, but we've got 15 schools now that are spending over $20 million per season on their roster.
Are we just basketball right now? That's what we're talking
Just
about.
talking basketball.
All right.
And we're looking at some teams that are, as we've talked about, the reports are of John Blackwell being one of them, where we've got some players in the SEC, ACC that are getting north of $5 million a season. And it kind of goes back again to what I was saying to Coach in the first segment, that in this article I was reading this morning, a lot of what we're doing in order to solve problems is merely continuing to throw money. And we keep saying
it's the American way, man.
I guess. But at some point, I keep waiting for it. It hasn't happened yet, because we've said this for years now. At some point, there'll be donor fatigue. There'll be a tipping point.
I've never said that.
Okay, I've said it.
I've
said it, Dan. I've said it. I'm
that's-
sorry.
I'm the
I'll make
voice
it
in the
singular and
wilderness
not
going,
plural.
I'm still waiting for sports to run out of money. I've been hearing that for decades. And yeah, the donor fatigue thing is carried. Sorry, that's my thing.
Yeah.
I've been hearing about donor fatigue now for 5 years. Still haven't seen it. So yeah,
but at some point, I'm feeling now like things are beginning to turn. This is not going to be an immediate U-turn by any means. But the fact that, is it Arkansas that's getting rid of their tennis program? One of the SEC schools is getting rid of golf. Like, some of the programs that we're getting rid of, I get it. They're not revenue generators, but now we start dropping these programs and it starts eroding and eating away at the fabric of our college institutions and their sports in order to keep football and basketball alive. This is where I start to wonder, are we now looking at maybe the car slowly beginning that U-turn?
You know, I wonder if when you're describing that, and I see where you're going with it, where my snide, cynical self goes is that, yeah, they begin to cut programs, they begin to do those things. And at some point, what are you left with? Then what are you going to cut with kind of closer to revenue program like women's volleyball if you're a Wisconsin, and I'm not saying that that's what's going on.
Right.
But as you begin to reduce the size of your athletics options, you're going to get to a point where, like, well, now what do we do to just save money so we can continue to invest in these things? So you might be right in terms of the slow U-turn, but I'm going to go with the idea that is going to be a very, very slow U-turn, and they're going to find different ways to keep revenue in, a la Duke with the Prime, Amazon Prime, and doing those things. I think a lot of universities are going to get really creative to drive revenue in there that are from sources they'd never considered in the past.
The problem, though, Charlie, for me, in what you described, and I completely agree that they're going to be looking for these different revenue streams in order to stay afloat, but Duke can get away with it. a Penn State might be able to get away with it in football, much
Mhm.
like what
Yep.
Notre Dame does.
Yep.
Arkansas, no. You know, I you can go down a list of schools, right, that won't be able to do it. And I think this is where we again see this disparity. And I think we're going to have to see a few of those on the other end, Charlie, that are going to have to crash and burn before anybody wakes
Right.
up to
And
it.
I think there's some programs in my mind I look at like a Villanova or a UConn who do still have their football programs, but they're just not as exciting to watch as their basketball programs. At what point do those schools start going, instead of just cutting all these smaller sports that aren't really like affecting whether we're gaining or losing money, do we just say, screw it, we don't need a football team? Or maybe even like in Arkansas, it's a little harder because they have been successful at football more recently than some of these other schools. But maybe like a Mizzou, who basketball wise hasn't been able to compete as well, and says, you know what, football is our moneymaker. We're just cutting basketball instead of going through this process of cutting all these Olympic sports one by one and just saying, you know what, we can put more effort, more money instead of splitting it half 50-50 with our basketball, football, and say, we're just going to focus on football. We're just going to focus on basketball. And we might have more schools that are going to do that.
Well, and I think I'm going to push back a little, like in the idea of what is a team like Arkansas going to do? They're not going to be able to compete. We would have said that about Indiana University football 2 years ago.
True.
And they're going to jump in. And I think teams are going to, like Coach Calipari, he's going to feel a lot of pressure to get really competitive really quickly so they can be competitive. They can bring that revenue in, those different things.
Mhm.
You can't count on Tyson Chicken all the time to get your team through there, but you need that one, right? You need that one base that Indiana found, and granted different sports, but I think there are opportunities for some universities that are kind of middling, high level Power 4 conferences. They can still push their way up, but the pressure is going to be immense to get to that point very, very quickly.
Yeah, and these schools are going to have to find the Mark Cuban sugar daddies of the world, like Indiana did, to help with some of these NIL things. All right, sorry, but I wanted to throw that out there because I thought it was interesting as we continue to see the money escalate. Even Coach in the last segment talking about agents and contracts. It's like you used to talk about scholarships, right? Now we're talking about agents and
And
contracts.
it still has that nails on the chalkboard thing, which there are no more chalkboards anymore, but you know what I mean.
Well, no, whiteboard. Yeah, okay.
Doesn't sound the same.
Nails on the smartboard.
Yeah, it's not the same.
It's not the same. This week, Donovan Davis, the number 31 overall recruit in the 2027 class, decided against staying in state. He's going to Iowa State to begin his basketball career. Now, a lot of people up in arms again because Greg Gard wasn't able to close the deal on a top recruit within the state. I wonder how much of it was Gard or how much of it was, I'm okay with going to Iowa State because the state doesn't know me, right? They know
It
me
could be.
now because I've been recruited, but you look at the number of eyes that would be on this young man, the pressure that would be on this young man at Wisconsin. I just wonder if going somewhere else and creating your own identity, not one that you've already created within the state because of your high school prowess, is just a better way to jumpstart your college career.
Yeah, and I see where you're going with that, but I also wonder now if today's highly recruited athlete for football or basketball also has almost commoditized the recruitment process a little bit.
Sure.
I'm going to go to Iowa State first. And if it doesn't work, I will go somewhere else. If that doesn't work, they don't look at it as a 4-year landing spot. They look at it as a landing spot with maybe pure intentions of doing really well. But at the same time, yeah, I still have options if this doesn't work out for me. So I think for a lot of players that, again, the highly recruited guys, the guys where there's a lot of competition to get them in, they may not be as concerned about the first choice. Can they get enough out of that first choice where maybe they can get something else down the road?
Right.
That may not be the issue. I don't know. Right. But when I look at some of these highly recruited guys, I have a hard time thinking they're looking at a university going, that's where I'm going to stay. That's the part that the snide, cynical part of me that is sports today.
Yeah.
Collegiately, I see that a lot.
And Charlie, it goes back again. I keep referencing Bart Lundy, who had joined us, in our first segment. Look at the number of kids, as I like to call them, that have come back now home, so to speak, that again, tried Syracuse, tried Alabama, tried
And why
Marquette
not,
even,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Now I can come home. I can be closer to home. I'm still playing Division I basketball. I have an opportunity to get more playing time. And to Dan's point, this might not be the landing spot for 2, 3, 4 years. It's the landing spot for next year. And that's the way we look at college athletics today. It's the landing spot for the upcoming season, and then all bets are off.
Well, and you have to make the choice that's going to be the best fit for you
Mhm.
at any given year. I think like when you look at some of these players that are going to Iowa State, that's the best option. You're going to go there, be a part of a surefire tournament team at least, and then you can be a part of that group because Otzelberger just rotates 10 guys in there throughout all these games. Like he very rarely is just playing 5 to 7 guys. You can get opportunities with that team. But then when that doesn't work out, or if that doesn't work out, you can take a step back and go, okay, what are the best schools now? Can I just go home to Wisconsin? On the other side of things, if you're a Andrew Rohde going to St. Thomas first and you kind of have to work your way up, you get an opportunity to go play at Virginia, which is a huge step up
Oh,
from
yeah.
St. Thomas. And then you get knocked back down a little bit and say, you know what? Maybe what's important to me is going home playing with my home team now, too. I also think with like Greg Gard specifically, sometimes I think he's too picky, and I think he has a system that he wants these players to for sure fit in. And that if he's going to recruit a player, if he's going to bring a player in, whether it's the transfer portal, whether it's through high school recruiting, that player he has to know for sure will be able to fit into his system. And I think if he doesn't feel like that guy will for sure fit into his system, it is not that top priority for them. But I think in the NIL landscape, you have to start making some of these guys top priorities just to get them to stay and stick around, because you've seen what it has done for the football program just this offseason. The type of press that you get because you're doing that is huge for you to be able to succeed moving forward in the next 5 years at least.
It becomes really challenging, to Charlie's point, because you want your culture to maintain.
Mhm.
And so sometimes being picky isn't a bad thing, but I understand exactly what Charlie's getting at. And it's hard really to fuss when you see, Daniel, how good Gard has been and what he has picked up in the transfer portal and brought, into the mix over there in Madison.
Well, and Charlie, let me ask you, when you're talking about being picky, and I see where you're getting with it, I do, but do you think we've seen Gard, I would argue, significantly evolve as a coach from very slow kind of half court game now to speed, quick threes. But do you think when you talk about being picky, do you think you're referring to like he really wants guys that are going to fit in the offensive set, or guys that he is still very particular about regarding defense, guys that aren't playing that may not see the floor?
I think it's truly just that, like, it's a little bit of both. It's got to be a player that I think he just knows will fit into his system, whether it's offense, whether it's defense. It's got to be a player that's going to slide in and be able to take that next step within whatever side of the ball he's playing on. I think that's really what he's looking for. It's not really just offense, defense. Is this guy good? Like, I think it's more the culture side of things almost. Is this guy going to be able to progress like we've seen John Tonji do, like we've seen John Blackwell do, like we've seen Nick Boyd do? Is he going to be like that? Is he going to be a Braden Carrington if he's a freshman coming in and able to kind of produce within my system right away? That's what he's looking for, I think.
All right, we're getting close to a break, but before we get to that break, real quick, let's just put this out into the atmosphere right now, because the eyes are now going to shift to Kager Kneppel, Khan's younger brother, as one of the top remaining basketball players who is not committed. There was a report this week that Duke now is in the mix, which obviously raises the stakes. So let's say this to mom and dad. Remember when you sent Khan to Duke? And you remember those late night travels, how expensive it got, hotels? Wouldn't it be nice if Kager was just close to home? Have you seen gas prices lately? Let's keep it close to home. He'd look great in a Wisconsin jersey or a Marquette jersey, a UWM or UW Green Bay jersey. Let's talk about Kager staying in the state and not joining the legacy of his brother at Duke. Because they're listening right now. Everybody's listening right now. So that's just my plea to the Kneppel family. And on that, we get to a break. It's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, welcome back in. College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are always powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. We're really up against the top of the hour, so let's do this one real quick. Unfortunately for the Badgers, the women's softball team fell yesterday. UCLA, I think they're 0-4 on the year against the Bruins. The Bruins are a juggernaut, just like they are in baseball on the men's side. But I'll say this real quick, Dan. Their game, when they upset Oregon, had to be one of the best, I'll call it just flat out baseball games I've seen all season long. The back and forth was absolutely incredible. The other thing to keep an eye on is the SEC is getting ready to implement the ABS challenge system when they get to their conference tournament. It's ironic that earlier this year they were working with umpires to expand the strike zone a little bit because games were dragging. And now we're going to implement the electronic box, which will then shrink the strike zones. So if you're going to an SEC game, pack a lunch, couple of beverages, you might be there for a while. All right, hour number one is in the books. When we come back, let's talk some Badger football. It's College Sports Weekly. We're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook, and we're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios.
Basketball, football, baseball. From Division 1 to Division 3, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Dom Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
All right, welcome back in. Hour number 2 of College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can join the conversation on the Nicolay Law Talk and text line 414-677-1250. You can find us on X and Facebook and all of the social media platforms at Wisconsin Sports Radio. Our thanks to our affiliates in Wausau at 93.9 The Game, here in Milwaukee at 1250 AM, 105.7 FM, The Fan, in Green Bay on 99.7 FM and 1440 AM, WNFL, and in Duluth Superior at 710 The Game. As we get into hour number 2, we're going to talk some Badger football now as they start making their way to the summer after their spring practices. We'll get into some Division III baseball and softball tournaments that are taking place today as conference champions could be crowned later this afternoon, or again, as we talked about in the opening, depending on the double elimination, might move into Sunday. But we'll get into that, and then we'll wrap up the show as we always do, handing out some shovels. So let's get into some Badger football here first and foremost. And we talked about it a little bit last week, but let's just reemphasize that opening game now at Lambeau Field on Sunday, September 6th, against Notre Dame has been moved to prime time. It's a 6:30 kickoff at Lambeau. NBC and Peacock will be covering it. It's a heck of a way to kick off your season against a team, Daniel, that I think many believe, based on how the contract is written for the playoffs, that Notre Dame will be one of those teams that you're going to find in the college football playoffs come November, unless somehow the entire world gets flipped on its head.
Yeah, you can't have playoffs with Notre Dame, except you can, and sometimes it's just fine. You know, it just works out really well. Yeah, look, it's weird. I don't want to like over dramatize this, whatever the word is.
That's all right. You're good.
You don't want to put too much pressure on one game, especially the first game, but my goodness, the Badgers need to be competitive.
Yes.
They need to be good. You do not want to lay an egg in prime time. One of the biggest, watchable games at Lambeau Field. You've got to be ready for this. And, that has been a challenge for Wisconsin recently. It's not that they have lost the games, but they haven't necessarily looked good winning. But now you're playing against Notre Dame. You got to be ready.
Absolutely. And you hope that they can go back a little bit to the magic of 2016 when they beat LSU at Lambeau Field. But Charlie, to Dan's point, I mean, we've started these seasons off under Luke Fickell playing directional schools like a lot of schools do. That's not a knock at the opponent. The knock comes in the fact that it's taken certain planets to align in order to win those games, when quite honestly, you should be blowing some of these schools out and you haven't been able to, and you got fed the storylines of, well, we're fixing, we're trying to get this, we're working on this, that, and the other thing, we're coming together, all of that. But then once the Big Ten starts, you realize that what you had in those non-conference games is what you really have now moving forward. So to Dan's point, not necessarily a win, you would hope for one, but at least be competitive.
Yeah, it would be nice, especially with all the hype that they've received throughout the transfer portal period, throughout this recruiting cycle, where they've been able to bring in these Wisconsin in-state guys to their program. At the same time, I don't know if I'm on the same level as you guys. This is still Notre Dame, a team that's going to lose in the first round of the college football playoffs when they get there, because that's what they do every single time. But I feel like that, from my perspective, this game doesn't matter if they lose. it matters the whole world if they win this game somehow.
Oh,
And
yeah,
if they
yeah,
can go
yeah.
out there,
I see
yeah.
what you're saying.
I
yeah.
think just like no matter what happens, whether it's laying an egg, whether it's lose by 2 points, this is a team that is trying to change their identity right away. And I think losing to a team that is a college football playoff hopeful at the beginning of the year isn't necessarily that big of a deal to me, even if it ends up being in blowout fashion. While I would like to see the Badgers compete, I am excited about this team and I want that to be a good game. I really only think this game matters if the Badgers win this game.
But where I would push back, and then you guys go ahead and push back as well, in the fact that if they get blown out, I mean, we've got a coach that his seat is extremely warm. I won't even call it hot yet, but it's extremely warm. And I think, Dan, if they go into this thing and lay an egg, even though you've got, your directional schools afterwards to kind of rebound and get yourself together, I think the sour taste in this fan base's mouth is not going to be something that they're going to tolerate.
Who's going to fire him? You don't have anybody right now to fire Luke
Oh, I'm
Fickell.
not-
I'm like,
but
I guess I don't
it's
know.
more than necessarily him being fired, let's say after week 2, 3,
Mhm.
4. It's more about, as we've talked about, putting butts in the seats when it's your chief revenue source.
Mhm.
And if the fan base is looking at what takes place at Lambeau, that place is going to be packed because it's Lambeau, right? It's going to be something different. We get to go up there on a Sunday and watch college football between our home state team and a power ranked
Legacy blue blood.
legacy,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
That place is going to be packed. Lay an egg. What happens when you play a directional school the following week at home and you're back to the Don Morton area of what, 40,000, 45,000 in
If you're
attendance?
lucky.
If
Yeah.
you're
Look,
lucky.
you'll get your first wave of fans being there if Wisconsin loses against Notre Dame and it's a bad game. It's an Alabama type game, right? If Wisconsin loses that game, that'll be 2 years in a row where you've known about this game for 3 to 4 years. This has been on the schedule. It's no surprise. You are building your program to be able to compete with these programs.
Right.
And if they lose poorly again, what you get the next week in Madison is you get people excited because it's Madison football. It's a beautiful September day and you're there. And then it just starts to fade away again. And again, depending upon how they play,
Mhm.
it could be really tricky. We're seeing, the energy for Wisconsin football. You hear, the media hype a little bit and people getting a little excited, but to your point, it's about butts and seats. And if people aren't feeling that experience, when we were at the games last year,
Yeah.
and we talked about it as we were walking towards the stadium, like the juice just wasn't there. It was not the same that we had been so used to for the previous 20 years.
Right.
It didn't feel like there was any energy going to the game. Just people just enjoying tailgates,
Right.
right? Enjoying a beer, but they weren't really excited about what was going to happen within the next hour or so. That's not what they were there socially.
Mhm.
They weren't there to really, enjoy what was going to happen. You didn't feel that.
No,
So-
that's a really good point.
So this
because-
game against Notre Dame, you're right. If they win, it's a big game if they win because suddenly there's a little bit of juice back in Madison that they haven't had for quite some time. But if they don't get it, it's going to be rough.
that would be rough. And to your point, there wasn't any juice last year whatsoever. And you saw even
We've seen
after
a
the
lot of
games,
Badger football.
and the place would clear out right as soon as jump around was done.
Mhm.
Say goodbye to the student section. Now, people will say, wow, the student section leaves early anyway. And I would push back on that and say, no, they don't. Because, for instance, 2 years ago, when that game against Oregon came down to the final 2 minutes, that entire stadium was packed. It was raucous. It was loud. The juice was there in that Oregon game. Now, when you start to lose games in the fashion that they were, people are like, all right, I came as a student, my experience is what? I get to see a Big Ten football game. I get to do jump around. And if we're playing poorly, then I exit stage left. I mean, there were times last year, was it the Northwestern game, when it was like all purple that was left
Mhm.
in the stands when that game came to a conclusion. They need to figure out a way. All right, let's flip the tide a little bit, because the Badgers did get out of spring practice healthy, which is a good thing, much like Bart Lundy's hoping to do with his summer practice. But the Badgers on the football side of things got out of spring spring break. They got out of spring practice healthy and ready to roll. But everybody, for the most part, has been gushing about Ryan Hopkins, the freshman quarterback. What kind of excitement should we be putting on a freshman who's playing spring ball and has yet to see a Big Ten defense or to have that defense scheme against the offense, so to speak, in a way to make your head spin like there's no tomorrow? I think it's great. He's got all the physical tools. That's awesome. But the hype that's surrounding his stature as it stands coming out of spring ball, I'm like, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's see what this young man is like when he gets thrown into the fire, because history says he probably will, because starting quarterbacks for the Badgers tend to go down very early.
It's the Eagles, right? If we could cue that one, everybody's talking about the new kid in town.
Right.
And that's what it is. And when you have an average football team with questions at quarterback, and look, I understand what we're looking at in terms of our QB1, but we've been looking at the same kind of story for the last 4 years about QB1, and this guy's really going to make the difference. So now you are an average to less than average football team. And a lot of times, whether it's pro or college, the most exciting thing about the team is the backup quarterback.
Yeah.
I heard this thing about this guy and he could be great. Let's let him get on the field and do that a little bit. You know what? We've seen the jump be so difficult for college quarterbacks to get into the NFL. And I think most of the time it's just as difficult for a high school quarterback to make the jump into, and let's not just college football. This is the Big Ten. Yeah, it's a big deal. So yeah, offer him some grace, let him breathe. Yeah, get him some snaps. That would be great. Get him out there and see what he can do. But right now, and we're talking about a team that appears to have a deeper quarterback room than we have in the past. You've got some guys that have had some experience in there now. He doesn't need to see a lot of time. He could, kind of redshirt the year after the year, but then you always risk, well, I'm not playing. I want to go somewhere else. So yeah, just everybody take a deep breath. I hope he's great. I really do.
And that's the nature, Charlie, of where we're at right now, is because you go into it and you go into the season with what you have, and that's it. You don't project 3-4 years like we used to, because we were developing players and we knew in a couple of years this guy, if all goes well, is going to ascend to the QB1 spot and move from there. What I don't want to see this Badger team do is neglect the development aspect of Ryan Hopkins, even if he doesn't see the field. To Dan's point, let's say he does redshirt and doesn't play a down. Just because you're worried potentially of him leaving, maybe we won't invest or put the time in necessary. I want to see them develop somebody once as a freshman so that we're not constantly looking for a starting quarterback to begin the season in hopes of trying to at least get ourselves back to 500.
I don't think, in my mind, I guess the way the landscape has played out, like, you can really truly redshirt him then. I think you have to give him that opportunity potentially to play real meaningful snaps at some point in this season in order to get him to say, you know what, this is my place. I think I can make this work here. That's what you did with Mason Bosa. That's what you did with Eugene Hilton by the end of the season last year. Both those players, you got them into those rotations, whether it was injuries or because you just wanted to get some fresh faces out there. But it got those guys to really, truly say, hey, I can envision myself in this group with this team. And I think kind of going to these guys transitioning from high school to college football, I guess I look at other positions across college football right now, and you're seeing some players be able to make that transition a little bit easier. Just Kadarius Toney at Miami, for example, last season, what he was able to do and the energy he gave to that Miami offense. And I know he's a gadget guy. They were kind of using him in ways where he just go out there and play how you play, be comfortable. Can you start doing that with the quarterback position now moving forward here in college football and say, you know what, a lot of these guys, they're getting trained at the high school level to be pro-style quarterbacks. Should we just start giving some of these freshmen opportunities, to get them to stick around and envision that kind of future with this program, but also to say, hey, you know what, talent-wise, maybe it's not as big of a gap as it used to be.
You know, the nice thing, though, about what Hopkins has done so far during spring ball is I think he's put some people in that QB room on notice. You know, you talked about, them having some, we'll still refer to them as upperclassmen, and Deuce Adams and Carter Smith, guys who I think came in thinking they at least would be QB2. Maybe they were going to battle for that with a shot at QB1. But now Hopkins comes in by all accounts, very mature, very intelligent, coming out of high school, and is pushing a little bit for that QB2 spot. I think that's a great thing to have within the room, that now you've got competition, something that has been sorely lacking in the QB office, so to speak, once the season has begun so far under Luke Fickell's tenure.
Yeah, you always hear about, that's kind of coach speak. You want each of your position rooms to have competition, that they're pushing each other. And you're right. We haven't seen a ton of that on the offensive side of the ball, either because of injuries or guys. And I'll say it, there are some guys you could watch early in the season. They checked out. And so it's hard to have that energy of competition in particular rooms a little bit. So yeah, if you can get back to that culture of competition within these different position groups, then your team's going to get better, but it's still hard to maintain guys that are going to be competitive and then feel I could play somewhere else. So again, I'll just say I hope the Badgers do well. It's just so hard for me to get excited about upcoming seasons, football, basketball, whatever it is, when you have a favorite team and you just don't know who's going to be there next year. You don't have that continuity. You don't see those people growing and investing in it. And that's just the way it is. But it's hard for me, Gen X and all that, to really kind of buy in sometimes into the program, because you just know from one year to the next, it's going to be different.
And that is, Charlie, a challenge to Dan's point is, again, we don't see the development the way we had prior to NIL and the transfer portal, again, where a Hopkins could come in and you're like, all right, let's just get through this year, because sophomore, junior, senior season, or at least sophomore and junior season, maybe he's good enough to make the jump to the NFL, but you knew you had something on the horizon. Now you can develop somebody, and all of a sudden they're entering the transfer portal, which everybody seemingly does. But I still think we can't neglect the development part. He may decide to stay. He may enjoy his time at Madison and say, you know what, this is going to be my team, at least for one more year. I've been developed, I've been coached, and I'm going to take over next season once we're ready to have the first snap.
Well, and I guess to my point before, a lot of these guys are coming in with some kind of level of development, especially if you're a highly recruited quarterback, if you're a highly recruited wide receiver. You're coming in, going to these camps that you've been doing throughout high school and even before high school, some of these guys, the 7-on-7s, doing all these things that, again, are getting you ready to be a pro-style quarterback. And I think a lot of these players realize that they're getting that type of development earlier on in their football playing careers and saying, you know what, I'm not going to sit here for 3 years when I know I've already kind of developed some of these things that they want me to develop. I know I can do these things. So Wisconsin, some of these other smaller universities, I do feel like have to start giving these freshmen, a lot of these guys, some kind of opportunity, especially if you feel like the competition in that room isn't up to par.
And that becomes the challenge for what I think Charlie is saying, which I agree with. But you've got a coach who struggled
That's
for a
exactly
few
what
years,
I was going to say.
and now is not going to risk his tenure as the head coach on a freshman who at some point will make a freshman mistake. I don't care how much you've been developed. It happens. You're 18. You're going to make a freshman mistake, and maybe at a crucial point that can cost you a game. And when you're somebody like Luke Fickell, who every snap now matters in a completely different way than what it did year one, I don't know if they're going to afford, unless injury comes into play, they're going to afford this young man the opportunity that that Charlie is talking about.
Yeah, it's hard for me to look at this team without recency bias, right? And you're mentioning injury, and again, they're all unique injuries. You could not have expected 4 quarterbacks to go down. It's just a ridiculous. The odds of that are just ridiculous.
Right.
But then not having the skill behind those quarterbacks to back it up, that's where I have a little bit of hope. At least that's what we're being spun, right? Because last 3 years we've had deep quarterbacks. We have guys that could jump in, and it did not work. It didn't work at all. So maybe this year is different. I'm hopeful about what's in the running back room a little bit. I'm praying that our offensive line is returning to form and doing that. I will say that I am excited about what I see on defense. That defense kept Wisconsin into games that it probably should not have been in. Deep into games, we saw Wisconsin beat 2 top 25 teams at the end of the season, which was fun. but they weren't offensively pretty games. Okay. So there is an element where if we can maintain what we have on defense and just see improvement on offense, then Wisconsin can be more competitive. And they, by comparison to the previous schedule last year, it's a little lighter.
Yeah.
They're not playing the heavyweights that they were in the Big Ten.
Yeah, last
So
year was brutal.
there's an opportunity for Wisconsin to take a jump forward, but it's got to be a convincing jump. Not only just for fans today, but for recruits coming in and for the portal.
And those recruits coming in, you can also talk about the recruits on the academic side, because let's face it, if you've got a high school junior or senior who's contemplating where they want to go to school, not an athlete, just where do I want to go to school, the experience part coincides with the academic part. And if the experience at Camp Randall isn't what it has been, or to the level that it's been over the last couple of decades, that it has this trickle down effect that I think a lot of times we don't necessarily think about.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of students too now when they look at colleges again, it's not necessarily about staying in state. If you're looking at a UW Madison, if you're looking at a Marquette, stuff like that from the area, you're probably looking at other universities elsewhere.
Mhm.
So what are those intangibles to keep you at home? Because it's actually harder to get into UW Madison as an in-state resident than it's ever been, to academically to get in there. So you might be looking at other places, be attracted to other places simply because you're equally as good a student as someone that's out of state, but they're hesitant to bring you in because they want that out of state tuition.
He came up with the word intangible. That's why he's the professor, man.
Damn straight.
There is no other way to say it. Let's get to a break. On the other side of the break, as we've been saying the entirety of this show, that we've got a lot of women's softball and men's baseball conference tournaments at the Division III level taking place. We'll break some of them down as we make our way into handing out some shovels before we wrap things up. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Welcome back in. College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can join the conversation on the Nicolay Law talk and text line, 414-677-1250. So let's talk some college baseball. Let's talk some college softball. I just paused. You would have had to have been part of the discussion during the break.
On the joke.
I was.
If you're not watching, it gave me the deepest death stare.
No!
To say that too.
You are so wrong. You are so wrong. Let's get to baseball. Top 25 at the Division III level. Whitewater continues to hold down the number 3 spot, 36-3 on the season. I don't know. I don't profess to be really great at stats, but 36-3 sounds like a pretty good
Typically
year,
pretty
right?
good, yeah.
Typically speaking, yeah, it's a pretty doggone good year. The weird part is, as we mentioned at the top of the show today, is going into the WIAC tournament, Whitewater lost. And again, in a double elimination situation, they were able to bounce back and now make their way as they'll take on the University of Wisconsin La Crosse coming up later this morning. Actually, right when we get off the air at 11 a.m., it'll be La Crosse and Whitewater vying for the WIAC title. It's funny for me as someone who attended UWL when they didn't necessarily have the greatest of baseball programs.
Sure.
The baseball program then went away, got resumed a few years after my departure, so to speak. And then since that point has steadily built that program into now, not necessarily, I hate to say it, to the level that Whitewater's at, but they are definitely a powerhouse to be reckoned with within the conference and have made a couple of trips to the NCAA tournament as well.
Yeah, and if you look at what La Crosse has done, the investments it's made into its athletics program, when you're there and you see the university and you're on the campus and you see the football stadium, and you see all the athletics there, you can understand why there would be players that are like, yeah, I can understand La Crosse, I could do that. And, it's good university, great time. It makes sense that you'd see some talent that want to go there, and they've been able to build off of varying programs, varying sports within that athletic program and just bring people in. It's been done a good job.
And it's the same thing with Whitewater. And it's the same thing. Look at even a school, Charlie, like River Falls, again, who's made investments into their athletic programs, not only to help those student athletes who are already there, but it's a great thing to bring a recruit in and say, hey, look at this shiny little brand new toy that you could now be a part of.
Right. And I think when you look at like the CCIW, the WIAC, all these conferences, they're like competing against each other more so than when I think you go to the D1 level. A lot of these schools are just competing for themselves and competing against other teams in the Big Ten and other teams in the SEC. I think when the WIAC has one team that takes that next step, they really want all these other teams to take that next step so that when the CCIW and North Central are running the show for a while, they can get back in the mix and take over again like they have over this past few years. It's really cool to see that you can have 8-10 schools come together and kind of say, we're going to uplift everybody so that we can make the whole conference uplift.
Yeah, it's funny to see. Again, I'll use River Falls as the example. You throw some money into the department, you build a shiny new toy, and Whitewater, La Crosse, Oshkosh, everybody's scrambling like, how do we get the funds together in order to equate that? So again, Whitewater, La Crosse, right after our show is done at 11 a.m., headed for 9 innings of baseball and a WIAC championship to the winner. On the women's side in the WIAC, we're down to, in essence, the final 4, and we'll get the champion crowned tomorrow. Stevens Point and Oshkosh, they'll go at it at 11 a.m., the tournament being held in Oshkosh, and then Whitewater and Platteville. Shocking. Whitewater's back in it. But Stevens Point, Oshkosh, Whitewater, Platteville, and again, I think the same thing can be said, right? You look at these schools, as soon as one team has success, everybody wants to be a part of it, and it becomes a recruitment tool to get top athletes. And the WIAC, I think across the board, does a great job of getting some of the best athletes from in-state
Yeah,
to be a part of
agreed.
the program.
Yeah, and really in the region, they're able to pull from a lot of different places because of if you look at and looking at the teams that are there, and I'll throw Oshkosh in there and Platteville too. They're recognized. The brand of the WIAC is recognized, and if you're a softball player wanting to continue to play, you look at the WIAC because it's WIAC. It's one of the options, and you have the ability to say, "Hey, Platteville is looking at me. You have to consider that. You'd be crazy not to." Now, candidly, young women are also going to be looking at things like programs and academics, and what are they going to do after softball ends, and that's going to play an important role in that. Where the guys, some of them, not all of them, are going to look at those things, but yeah, just the state school reputation that is there for the WIAC, and then the athletics reputation that is there makes it a solid landing spot.
So again, Stevens Point, Oshkosh, 11 a.m., Whitewater, Platteville at 1:30. Winners of those games then play for the WIAC championship in softball. Let's move to the NACC and talk baseball as they're down to the Final Four. It's Concordia University of Chicago playing MSOE. Aurora will play the winner of what is known as Game 9. So we've got another game that they'll play the winner of, which probably is that Concordia MSOE game for the NACC championship. Charlie, here's the thing that I think will surprise some, not everybody, but some, maybe those who are north and west of us who are listening on our affiliates as we read through earlier. MSOE, the Milwaukee School of Engineering, obviously turning out some of the brightest minds, one of the top engineering schools that you'll find not only in the Midwest, but in the country. But their athletic programs are really good, and they've invested money into their athletic facilities to upgrade, to innovate, whatever you want to phrase it as. And this MSOE baseball team has been one to reckon with at the Division III level now for quite some time.
Well, and I think they've done a really good job just across all sports, not even just baseball, but finding these academically gifted people that normally would be going to bigger universities, but saying, "Hey, I know you still want to play. I know you still want to be out here and doing these things that you've grown up doing your entire life." And I think that's huge to have that kind of recruiting mindset and saying, you know what? We know academically what we're looking for. We also know that some of these kids may not want to be playing sports. Let's really target this group that is kind of on the fence. Is it academics? Is it sports? We can offer both to you. And they've really cornered that market in D3 sports even.
And Dan, to Charlie's point, we've had Brian Miller, who was the former athletic director and head men's basketball coach at MSOE on our program a few times. And that's precisely what he said. There's a small, I'll call it a small pocket of students who fit as far as what MSOE is looking for. So you're not competing, let's say, always against the WIAC schools or schools across the country. You're competing with maybe a dozen engineering schools across the country. So for someone who's going into that as a potential profession and still then wants to play at the collegiate level, I to say it's easier is wrong.
Right.
But you're not competing against a lot of schools because your base is a little bit more finite.
Yeah, and you're not getting distracted about all the other, players and student athletes that are out there. As you guys have said, there's that particular pool that you're going to be fishing in.
Right.
And that's it. So you don't need to feel like you need to pull people from everywhere. You know exactly where you're going. And MSOE in particular has a strong kind of narrative. They don't need to sell anything more than what they are and where they're from, and they can convince people enough of the time to say, yeah, we want to play for you. We want to go to school and get a degree.
And the fact that many of them already know what the engineering schools are they want to look at. And so to have athletics as an offering and successful athletics at that's a great piece of PR to have. On the women's side, as far as softball goes in the NACC, Lakeland will play Concordia University of Wisconsin at 11. Benedictine will play Dominican at 1:30. The winners of those games will play tomorrow for the NACC championship. And Dan, I was talking to you off the air, watching some of the highlights yesterday. Concordia University of Wisconsin lost So they're getting a second chance opportunity in this double elimination format. And it was an unbelievable game against Benedictine, and Benedictine closed it out with a diving catch in the gap. I mean, it was watching the highlights. I didn't get a chance to watch the entirety of the game, but watching the highlights reminded me a bit of when I was talking about Wisconsin and Oregon the other night, where it was just an unbelievable game.
But just the entertainment factor, that kind of a play at the end of the game where both teams' hearts kind of fall into their stomachs a little bit. If you're Benedictine, you think, oh no, we have this wrapped up,
Right.
we're going to win. And if you're Concordia, you're thinking we got a shot, we're going to come back, we're going to do this. And all within 10 seconds, your mindset just completely reverses. It's why you watch games. It's why you watch softball, baseball, whatever it is.
And that's why we love sports, because those things takes place. So once again, Lakeland and Concordia University of Wisconsin at 11, Benedictine and Dominican at 1:30. Let's close it out. Let's talk how the CCIW gets ready to wrap things up as I wait for this beloved piece of machinery to refresh. Thank you very much. Baseball wise, Carthage is playing North Park again. That starts here in just about 20 minutes. And then the winner will play Milliken at 3 for the CCIW championship. And Charlie, you kind of looked and went, Milliken? Really? But they're there, aren't they?
They are. And I like it's kind of cool with the CCIW. I think some other conferences, like even like the WEAC, you have a lot of teams that are just good at a lot of sports, a lot of schools that are just good at a lot of sports. And the CCIW, you have each school kind of has its own sport that they are just really good at for some reason. And it just carries the rest of their programs around. Like I went to Elmhurst University in the CCIW. It was basketball. Basketball just carries that school, not nearly as much as now as when I was going 4 years ago, but still it runs that. And then football was not good. Baseball was figuring itself out. Like you had a lot of sports that were just really figuring themselves out. And then you have obviously North Central at the top, who is good at everything. But outside of that, every other school kind of has their specialty. Milliken looks like they're starting to get in that baseball run.
And it's funny that Charlie just said what he did, because it led right into where I was going to go as we close out the baseball side of the CCIW. It's weird to not see North Central there because they are so doggone good at everything. To not see them here in the midst of potentially playing for a baseball championship within the conference, a little different.
Yeah, a little different, but you have, like you said, Charlie, you've got all these teams that have their thing, but that's kind of the nature of like D3 sports particular. You're going to have that rotation a little bit.
Right.
My question to you guys, it's one of those age-old questions. You have an opportunity to play in the morning game to get into the championship, or you wait as the champion. Which one do you want?
Go ahead, Charlie. I'll let you start.
I want the morning game.
I do
want to
too.
get going as early as possible and get the juice flowing. I hate waiting for anything.
Yep.
Like
Now-
when it comes to that, you can't wait.
Sorry, Charlie, I mean to
okay.
interrupt you, but the whole thing there too is what we've been talking about as far as injuries go. You hope that you get that morning game, you win, and you have the opportunity then to play in the afternoon. But that idea of what if I've got to go through how many arms to get to that championship game? But I'm with you guys as well. I would not want to be sitting, especially in this lovely Midwestern weather that we've had, because you never know, is it going to be 70 or is it going to be 42, windy and rainy on any given day? That makes a big difference as well. All right, CCIW. On the softball side of things, that comes up again at 11 a.m., and we've got a championship game on hand between Augustana and Illinois Wesleyan. Now, all of these games are being played down in Bloomington, Illinois, so we should have a softball champion crowned by early this afternoon within the CCIW. And these games, Dan, they just get an added level of excitement, not only because it's within the conference, but you're getting an automatic bid to head to the national tournament.
Yeah, you're playing for that one opportunity to keep playing, right?
Right.
And just say that you were in the national tournament. I think that's for any athlete, for that opportunity. We saw that, last fall when we were at Concordia, and what it meant to the football team to get into that. You hear that with basketball all the time, what it just means to be in that national tournament. It's no different if it's softball or baseball. You win that tournament, you win that regular season, like, yeah, we're in, we get to keep playing.
And it was the women's softball team as well at Concordia of Wisconsin last year that got to the national tournament. And the buzz, even as the students had left, there was still a buzz around the
men's
university.
lacrosse, same thing at Concordia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So as we always say, if any of those games piqued your interest, all you got to do is go to the conference website or the school's website. You go to the schedule, there'll be a live tab, a camera, whatever the case may be, and you can just, on your tablet, your phone, your computer, you get a chance to watch those games without sometimes having to necessarily sit out in this beloved Midwestern weather of what we call
It's
baseball
pretty good
season.
today. Today's gonna be a
Today's
good
pretty
day for
good.
baseball.
Today's
Yeah.
pretty good, but we don't want to jinx it. Watch all of a sudden it start raining in 2 seconds. With that, we'll take our final break of this morning. And when we come back, we'll hand out some shovels. It's College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
know what? I want to shovel the funk. I want to shovel the funk. I want to shovel the funk. I feel like shovel the funk. I got to shovel the funk. You want to shovel the funk? Do you want to shovel the funk? Then go ahead. Go.
One last time, it's College Sports Weekly live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We are powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Before we hand out some shovels, I got an update from Evergreen Golf Club where the guys are playing and listening on the Odyssey
How
app.
competitive is it?
It says at this point they're still even, which tells me they haven't left the bar yet and teed off. So good. I hope they're having a good time out there over at Evergreen Golf Club. So with that, let's hand out some shovels. Charlie, go get them.
All right, I'm going to head back to the Wisconsin Badgers and their softball tournament over in the Big Ten tournament, but I'm not going to talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. I want to give my shovel to Megan Grant, who tied the all-time softball single-season home run record with 37. Awesome. That's just a crazy number. I can't imagine ever hitting that many. It's been really crazy the amount of power you've seen come out of college softball lately, so it's really cool to see that too.
And the fact that the last home run, I think it was the last one that she hit, it was in the Rutgers game, I think it was, where she hit the scoreboard and did the bat flip. Like as soon as she hit it, it was just like gone. I'm gonna go ahead and trot. Yeah, that was fun to watch. And again, I go back to that Oregon game, one of the best games when you're up 1-0, you're down 2-1, then you go up 3-2, now you're down 4-3. It was just that back and forth all day long. Professor, you're up, bud.
We touched on it. We didn't really talk about it. SEC and ABS, and move into that. Did I take yours?
No, it's all right.
All right.
Go with
yeah,
it.
Because that's where baseball is headed. I get it, but I question why you're doing it right now. You've had a whole season of regular non-ABS baseball where you can review or not review, and now all of a sudden you get into the playoffs tournament, and now you're doing it. It changes. You're not used to it. It changes it. I think it adds a level of complexity. It's unfair to the players that may not be ready for that kind. And maybe it's only the coaches that are making those challenges, but I don't know how it's going to work in the SEC. But right now, it seems like there's pressure put on there that it didn't need to be put on there. Just let it go for one more season, then introduce it in the regular season, so it carries through the entire baseball season for the SEC.
You almost get the feeling, Dan, like the SEC saw what Major League Baseball is doing and said, oh, a shiny new toy.
Let's do that.
Let's do it. And not understanding what the consequences are going to be, because now suddenly you might have to shift from a mentality standpoint, and you're going to send your conference champion to the World Series, the College World Series. They're not using it there. The SEC is the only team that will be utilizing it. It reminds me a lot in this state of when we argue about whether high schools should have a shot clock. The reason high schools don't have a shot clock is there are a lot of districts that can't afford it, and not necessarily the hanging of the clock above the backboard. It's every week hiring somebody to run said clock that dips into that budget that they can't afford. So I'm going to be very interested to see how this plays out as well. I'm going to give a quick shovel out to the Big Ten, because UCLA vying for the softball championship, their men's baseball team is on fire. And when you think about all of the national championships that have been won this year, including women's hockey with Wisconsin, how many have come out of the Big Ten? So I'm looking forward to see how that all plays out with the baseball and softball World Series once we get to that point. All right, time for us to wrap up. Huge shout out, Bart Lundy. Thanks, Coach, for jumping on and joining us. For the Professor, Dan Underberg. For our captain, Charlie Usen, I'm Don Wachillis. We're back in 6 and 22.